This is Home Games. That is Rick Zamperin from 900 CHML Radio. That is Bubba O'Neill from CHCH TV Sports. Steve Milton down at Tim Hortons Field from the Hamilton Spectator. I'm Scott Radley from the Hamilton Spectator and 900 CHML. And guys, last week was American Thanksgiving, which a lot of people in hockey say that's the moment when you can take stock of what's happening in the league, when you can see what teams are headed to the playoffs, when you can start to make some gradings on what's happening in hockey. Rick, to this point then, what is the biggest surprise in the NHL so far?
Well, lots to choose from because there's a lot of players who are having great starts to the campaign, some who are having disappointing starts to the season as well. You can say that for a lot of teams in the league too. I'm going to go with a guy who used to be a Toronto Maple Leaf, is now plying his trade in Colorado, and that's Nazem Kadri, who's having an outstanding start to the season. Really good hockey player, but I'm not sure many of us thought that he'd be this red hot. Certainly has the skills to do so, but with Nathan McKinnon down and, Colorado coming off a disappointing exit to the playoffs, some still thinking that, Jared Bednar is not the answer behind the bench. Nazem Kadri has been, I think, really the engine that has made the Avalanche go. And I think he should be highlighted as one of the best players right now on the planet. It's kind of hard to fathom because at any moment he could do something dumb and get himself suspended, but maybe he's saving that for the playoffs. But Nazem Kadri would be my choice right now.
That's the biggest question, isn't it, with him, is that you're always
ticking time bomb
for the shoe to drop, because by himself, fantastic. Yeah. It's just what's going to happen.
That's pretty crazy.
Well,
what do you think, Bubs?
This question in itself is silly, in my opinion. And Rick,
thank you.
And Rick can attest to this, because when you think about the Maple Leafs in the past and some of the great starts that they've had up until about November, December.
Don't jinx it.
Oh, well, I'm just telling you what happens in the end, right? It's like that 5-part series that we saw.
Spoiler alert.
We knew the ending.
Spoiler alert.
It's exactly right. We can't. Thanksgiving. What kind of mark date is that? Anyhow, if I had to nail down something, I think you would have to think of two of the worst franchises in the National Hockey League, and that being Carolina, which is kind of streaky as it's been, and because they've made a couple of cup appearances, and the Florida Panthers were really no one. You combine those two teams, and I think they have 5 losses. 5. Like it's shocking that these teams have been so good, and yet in one place for sure they just don't care. And in Carolina, they're more worried about the Panthers and other things that are going on right now. Let's see how much longer those two franchises can maintain their fine play. They have some great, outstanding stars on both teams. I just unfortunately think I don't know if there's too many people that appreciate them.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Scott.
No, I like it. It does drive, I think, a lot of longtime hockey fans crazy in established cities when you see teams like that do well, because they're like, how come our team doesn't do this? We're the long-suffering fans. It's like with Vegas going to the finals. We're the long-suffering fans. How do you get this? And you don't even care.
Is part of that management can sort of have a plan and not sort of be influenced by anything else, because there isn't that overall kind of pressure that, it's often said that the fans and the media get the third line center changed in Montreal and Toronto, right?
There's also I think the opposite of that too. I think there's something to that, but there's also the point that if you don't win in these places, nobody cares. So you'd better win. It may not be every year, but you'd better find a way to be successful, to be good.
Yeah.
And with the Panthers, you also have to include the fact that they lost their head coach. Right. That's
mid-season, not because of performance, but different kind of performance, lack of performance.
Yeah.
All right, Steve.
One of the things that surprises me a little bit when we're talking about those teams is the relative strengths of certain divisions. I thought the Central Division that's one of my shocks, that I think it's a lot weaker sort of overall than I might have expected. I mean, it was probably in my mind the weakest division to start with, but I'm surprised at that. With the Wild are sort of on top at 12-6, and you got the Blues and the Jets and the Avalanche and the Preds. They're all kind of just in there, and we knew the Preds weren't going to be be too much. But I would think the performance of Calgary, particularly keeping the puck out of the net in Calgary, is I mean, you could have predicted they were going to be pretty good, but we had that whole Canadian division thing, for lack of comparison. And I know that was a big thing about Bub during the last year. Bubs was really sort of down on it, and so I don't think we could regard it. And it's still hard to know what that Canadian division really was last year, and how what kind of comparison that it made. But I think Calgary, given that I didn't know how to compare it and figure out how they were going to do coming out of this one, that one does shock me. And of course, they've had some players play up to what you think you can play, but every team says we're going to be this good if in the Leafs case, like if the top four play and they get something out of the bottom six, and for the most part, some of that's been working out, but those are all ifs. And Calgary's ifs seem to be, at this point, it's still early.
It's still early.
Yeah, it's still early.
But and Steve, we all covered Jeff Ward when he was coach of the Bulldogs. Jeff's a good guy. I was rooting for Jeff Ward, but you bring in Sutter. I hate to say, you bring in Sutter and you give him a full training camp, and boy, they look like a different team.
Well, here's my concern with that. It's the flip end of that.
How long does his?
It's a long. You know how much travel you have when you're one of those two teams, Calgary and Edmonton, and it's a long season to be ground down.
Yeah.
And if they have to fight to sort of make the playoffs, which I don't think they will, I don't think they'll maybe be playing every game at the end as if it's a playoff game, which might help. But when you've got a guy like that,
let's not forget they lost their captain too, Mark Giordano, in the offseason to Seattle in the expansion draft, and Jacob Markstrom's having a great comeback season like he had in Vancouver. So
that's why I say the part of it that gets me, Rick, is how well they're doing at keeping the puck out of the net. That's a defensive idea thing. I mean, Scott's right. There's a lot of Sutter in that as well. Sutter in there as well.
I'll say this. I had a hard time choosing what would be the most shocking. One would be Vancouver, which is terrible, and like Elias Pettersson, just not even being there. Another shock is the Leafs. I think they're third right now in goals against.
Yeah.
And Austin Matthews, and they're not putting up. I mean, they do have their moments, but just defensively good, which is the opposite. But no, the number one shock to me by a million miles is just the atrociousness of the Montreal Canadiens. I mean, the team that went to the Stanley Cup Finals, and I know Carey Price is not back, and I know that Weber is not playing, and there's some other things, and you lost Deneau. But to go from the finals to being behind Seattle, behind Ottawa, behind Buffalo, probably right now the worst team in the NHL it's a shocking free fall. I thought they'd be down. I didn't think they'd be like this.
Very similar to that, the New York Islanders, another team that went to the conference final, was a goal really away from beating Tampa Bay out in the Eastern Conference Final, or whatever the semifinal that they called it. And now they can't buy a win. I know they were on the road for the first couple of weeks because their new stadium, but still, I mean, that's a team that has more talent on the ice than people realize and plays a great system under Barry Trotz, but not working so far this year.
But my confidence level for the New York Islanders to rebound is much higher than the Montreal Canadiens.
Yes.
And I think that's the issue there, because I think Trotz can get this back on the rails in a very, very tough division. But the Montreal
also get used to their home, Bubba, too, right? They'll get used to that new home. They haven't done well in their home.
They'll find a way. I mean, maybe they'll get in, and that's a team that can, to me, just needs to get in the dance, and they can do some crazy things. Montreal, to me, is a complete tire fire. What's going to happen with the general manager? You got a lame duck general manager. You're not quite sure about the ownership and what they want to do. The French question is coming up again with the general manager. If the general manager does he need to speak French? Does a new head coach come in? I mean, Deschamps got signed to that new contract extension last season out of the gate. Did he deserve it? I mean, you're right about Price and Weber, but those guys aren't coming back anytime soon.
Well, Price is coming back, and that's the problem now. If you listen to what's going on in Montreal,
should he come back?
Well, that's what they're talking about Montreal. Now a lot of the fans are saying, wait, why do we want Carey Price to come back and start winning games for us if he does and get us out of the Shane Wright sweepstakes? Now there's no way we're making the playoffs. Let's not finish ninth last. let's finish at the bottom. But you know what? That's the problem. Carey Price comes back. He might start winning you some of those games you're losing and build your confidence a little bit. And then all of a sudden you end up where Montreal seems to always end up, right in the mushy middle, except for last year, of course. Anyway,
One last other question to ask you guys about the Habs here. Is this really a comparison or a viewing of regular season hockey and playoff hockey? The fact that they played playoff hockey so well last year, they had a team, I guess you could say, was, quote, built for the playoffs. But it's this team, as it's assembled right now, minus those two stars and one that's probably not coming back at Weber, that they just can't compete in the regular season style hockey.
Yeah, this is a team, remember the bubble, they were in because they were the 24th team or the 23rd team. And they beat their first round opponent to get in, and they made some noise. Come playoff time, it's a very different hockey team because of the goaltender that they had still on the roster, but not on the ice. If Carey Price is on the ice, they can beat anybody, as they showed last year. So if they're in the playoffs, fine. The struggle and the challenge for them is getting to the playoffs, and they're not going to make it this year.
Not going to make it. No.
what do you think? What is the biggest surprise in hockey right now at the Thanksgiving, despite what Bubba says? Thanks, Bubs, for pumping up my question. Despite it being a stupid question, at the Thanksgiving, U.S. Thanksgiving marker, which many people, many experts say is the place where you can start to make some grades on this. What do you think? What is the biggest surprise in hockey right now? We would love to hear from you. And please, when you send in your note, mention that it's a great question. It was a fantastic, the questioner gave a great question, and Bubba was totally out of line for questioning the question.
Are you having security issues today, Scott?
I am. Yeah, there's all kinds of things going on, Steve. Don't ask. We'll talk to you soon.